Go.
Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about stress management, and I wrote 2020 edition because I think this is something that's super relevant right now. Even if you watch this later in the year, next year, whatever, I don't think anyone that is alive right now can say that in recent memory they have lived through any period of time in their life that has been as stressful and as all over the place as 2020 has been. So I think it's a really good opportunity, silver lining, trying to focus on the positive, really good opportunity where if you can learn to manage your stress through what is essentially the apocalypse, you're set for the rest of your life. So this is the perfect time to learn how to control and mitigate that stress. And I think it's important to realize, if you ask someone, all right, do you feel stressed? I think we're very good at tuning out stress. We become very good at being able to tune out long periods of chronic discomfort because that's just your brain's coping mechanism. So if you don't feel stressed, there are some ways where, hey, maybe your body is telling you that you're stressed, even if you're not consciously aware of it. So some of those things are changes in eating or sleeping, right? If you're snacking a lot more or you're snacking a lot less. Some people are the opposite. Some people, their appetite goes out the window. If you're getting up in the middle of the night, you're having a hard time falling asleep. Or if your sleep is a lot less restful and maybe during the day you've noticed you're way more tired just because your sleep is crap. If you're having difficulty concentrating, I know for me, that's a big one. I just feel like I have no brain cells lately. And I know that that's very much to do with being stressed. And I know it's very much to do with the stress impacting my sleep. So those are all very connected. If you have chronic health issues, especially if you're someone who has autoimmune issues, digestive issues, anything with your stomach, you just notice, hey, my stomach is just crazy lately. It could be stress related. Mental health issues, I think that's an obvious one, but it's good to bring it up anyway. If you've noticed your anxiety's gotten worse, any depressive symptoms have gotten worse, again, all very stress related. And increased use of tobacco, drugs, or alcohol. And I think the alcohol is the biggest one because people are just like, oh, I'll have a drink after work or a drink at the end of the day. Realize that if that is increasing in frequency, a noticeable amount, it definitely is indicative of that becoming a coping mechanism. And that does pinpoint that, hey, you may not consciously be aware of the stress, but you're consciously aware of enough unpleasantness where you are trying to blunt it and numb it. So it's just something to be aware of. When we go over consequences of chronic stress, I don't think it's really personally, and I don't think anyone would disagree with me, I don't think it's possible to overstate what chronic stress can do to the body. And this is just a couple of things. But again, going back to the working out, I know everyone here is really big on their strength training and trying to be as strong and healthy as they can be. It's going to decrease your ability to recover from workouts. It's going to increase your strength. It's going to put you more at risk for injury. But it's also going to affect every other aspect of your life. Going back to the mood and the mental health, that decreased mood is going to impact your productivity. It's going to impact your relationships. So again, it goes beyond just the gym. You're also looking at decreased immune function, which, in the age of COVID-19, that's not what anyone wants to hear, which is why I think it's kind of almost sick and ironic that stressing about something may put you at a higher risk of getting it because your immune system isn't going to be where it needs to be. You're also going to be much more prone to water retention, which is something that's a pain in the butt if you're trying to use this time to cut body fat. It becomes very difficult to really track your progress. I know I'm one of those people. I just retain water like crazy, whether it's carb manipulation, sodium manipulation. I'm a little bit stressed. It's like 4 or 5 pound fluctuations overnight. Females are going to be a little more predisposed to it, but guys can get it too. And you're going to be at increased risk of disease. And that's something that's, 4 or 5 months of chronic stress isn't going to give you a disease, but realize, were you chronically stressed before 2020? Will you continue to be chronically stressed after 2020? If you're alive and you're breathing and you have a job, then the answer is probably yeah. So realize that this is where we're talking about it in this, context. But so long as you continue to be alive, you're going to be exposed to stressors. So that prevention of disease is something that has to be in the back of your mind for the rest of your life, basically, because realize, what you do in your 20s, 30s, and 40s could set the stage for having great 70s and 80s, or having, suboptimal quality of life. So realize that's the long game. The decreased ability to recover from workouts, that's the short game. That's stuff that's readily noticeable, and that's stuff that you can fix. The increased risk of disease, once you've lived your life a certain way for many decades, there's only so much you can do to mitigate that. So strategies, because I'm very big on, okay, we've identified that we've got a problem. What can we do? And something to realize is that, again, you're never going to be able to completely remove stress from your life. We want to come up with ways of managing our responses to things, because a lot of things that we can't control right now. I can't control how many people are wearing masks, how many people are abiding by social distancing. I can't control the economy. There's so much, and I can go on and on and on. But what I can control is how I'm going to respond to those things, and what I'm going to do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that, I'm focusing on what I can control, because that in and of itself, I think, is empowering, and that's going to decrease your stress level. So identify what exactly is stressing you, because chances are it's not just, oh, I'm stressed. There's something stressing you. People, unless, barring any kind of anxiety disorder, usually there is a stressor. So what is it? Why is it stressing me? Because I think a lot of times, if we can rationalize why something is stressing me, when I was little and I used to overreact to things, my mother used to tell me that I was making thunder in a cup of water. So essentially what that means is I was taking a cup of water that was tiny, insignificant, and I was making a thunderstorm in it. I was blowing it wildly out of proportion. So sometimes if you rationalize things, you're like, well, actually, okay, yeah, that's stressful, but it's not end of the world stressful. What can you do to make the stressor go away? Sometimes, like I said, you can't, which brings us to the most important thing. If I can't, how can I manage my response to it? So one thing to realize is that you can decrease your stimulus to things that are stressful. And I can't harp on that enough, because I think we are conditioned to feel stressed when we're not connected, because we feel left out of the loop. So we don't want to shut off the TV. We don't want to get off social media for a couple reasons. The first one is, if I don't know what's going on, I feel blind. And the second thing is, our brain has been conditioned to be addicted to the constant feedback, to the likes, to the automatic reward of having our posts liked and shared. We've rewired our brain to depend on that. So one thing to try is literally shut off your TV. If you're telling me you're always playing in the background, I know at my house that's a thing where my mother's always doing it, and I'm like, Ma, just shut the TV off, like you're gonna lose your mind. And get off social media. It doesn't mean permanently. It could mean, I'm gonna have 15 minutes of Instagram a day, and that's it. You can set a timer, and that's your designated time. But realize that the more you continue to put your brain in a position that it's absorbing all this information, our brains were not really originally meant for that. If one newspaper, right, let's say you're not even a phone, let's not even talk about phones for a second. If I were to go pick up a copy of Newsday, in that copy of Newsday, in that one sit down reading cover to cover, I have been exposed to more information and more news than someone would have been during their entire lives during like medieval times, for example, prior to written word being something that was widely accessible to a majority of the population. So just one day's newspaper is way more than the human brain was used to processing. Now, in that time frame, I would argue that I don't think we evolved rapidly enough at the same pace that our phones did, right? Computers, our means of communication evolved. I wouldn't say that I think our brains evolved at the same rate to be able to, in a healthy manner, constantly have that feedback and not start to experience signs of chronic stress. So realize that your brain is not meant to be hooked up to a computer or a phone all day long, and respect that. It's okay to not have a social media presence for a little bit. It's okay to not be hooked on the news and hooked on what's being shown. There's nothing wrong with wanting to take a step back and wanting to preserve your mental health. I think first and foremost, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. Now, when you're managing your response, again, going back to taking inventory of the actual situation, right? rationalize it. Why am I upset? What is the worst case scenario that could come from this? I forget where, I think it's some entrepreneur. I read one of his books. I'm blanking on his name now. But essentially, he said when you take any risk, part of mitigating the stress associated with risk is being okay with the worst possible scenario and accepting it as a possibility. Um, and when you've given yourself that ability to, this is the absolute worst possible scenario. And if that happens, I know that I have the capability to move past that and recover from it. Once you've come to terms with the worst possible scenario, um, you've officially taken back a lot of control over a situation that you may not have control over. Because at the end of the day, regardless of how that plays out, you have already in your head empowered yourself where, hey, you know what? Let's use COVID as an example. I don't know if things are going to go back to normal and things are going to reopen by August, right? But if they don't, worst case scenario, let's say we're stuck in lockdown till September. All right, you know what? I think I've figured out this at home thing. I've ordered bands. I have a bit of a home gym going, right? So in my head, I'm coming to terms with what the worst case scenario could be. I'm owning it. And I'm realizing that my ability to respond to that worst case scenario, the ball's now in my court because I'm ready for it. So if it doesn't happen, great. And if it does happen, I'm ready. And that's a lot less stressful. And another thing to realize is that your body is going to subconsciously respond physically to what you're thinking in your brain. So you want to control your physical response, right? I noticed this the other day. I was watching, I remember a couple of weeks ago, and it's very hard for me to watch things and have my jaw drop, and I'm usually not reactive physically. And I remember I was watching something on the news, like 11 o'clock at night, and my jaw dropped. And I remember like having to like unclench my jaw and like shake it out and like move because of how stiffened my body had gotten, right? So when you are very, very stressed and you're inputting something that is wildly stressful, your hands and your jaw are going to clench, your shoulders are going to get tense, you're going to start breathing fast, usually through your mouth. Nasal breathing goes out the window, and realize that fast mouth breathing is a form of hyperventilation. It's a form of panic breathing. You want to mitigate that. So once I realized that, it was like, oh crap, like you're making it worse. Like, stand up straight, fix your jaw, like relax, go for a walk, do something, loosen up. But I could feel how stiff my body had become, and that was not helping the stress level at all. Especially it was 11 o'clock at night. I wanted to go to bed. That is not optimal, sleeping arrangements. Do as I say, not as I do. Do not watch the news at 11 o'clock at night. It was just something that was pretty breaking and severe. So I just felt like I couldn't turn the TV off, but realize that, you do have to, okay, it's done, breathe, relax, take a quick walk if you need to. All right, shake it off, go to bed. And for me, that was, all right, realizing my physical presence is of stress, right? My jaw is clenched. I'm standing in a way that's very tense. I can feel my traps, like my shoulders are shrugged. Everything's super tight. I went for a walk. I stretched out a little bit, listened to some soft music, and then went to bed. Did I get the best night's sleep? Absolutely not. But it didn't take me like 3 hours to fall asleep, which I think if I hadn't addressed my physical response to what I was watching, I definitely would have been tossing and turning all night. So that's just some stuff to realize that, your body is going to respond. Be conscious of it, because then you can control it. A lot of your responses are unconscious until they're not, if that makes sense. Where even something like breathing, for example, I hope you're breathing unconsciously right now. Because if you didn't, there'd be a problem. But a lot of times breathing is unconscious. And that's why when we tell people, hey, breathe through your nose, not through your mouth, or stand up straight, that's unconscious behavior. So it's a pain in the butt to correct it because I'm not thinking about it. But the moment your unconscious response becomes conscious and you're aware of it, you can 100% control it. And I think that's the key to stress and a lot of things in terms of just general health, but especially stress and stress management, is to take your unconscious responses, understand what those unconscious responses look like, and then make them conscious, because then you can begin to undo that damage, if that makes sense. Easier said than done, I know, but it starts with controlling the stimulus, decreasing the stimulus. Even, if you need cold turkey and just quit it, get off social media for a week, get off watching the news for a week, whatever you got to do to decrease that stimulus and let your brain breathe for a second. But realize that, and I know that with all the stuff going on, it becomes very easy I need to know what's happening right now. And there's very few things that knowing them in the moment would actually impact your life in that moment, if that makes sense, and it could be something good, it could be something bad. But if you were to find out several hours later about that said thing, it probably wouldn't change the outcome of anything that had happened, whether it's good or bad. So that's something to realize, that, we treat everything as an emergency, as a high priority thing that I need to know about right now. That's not always the case. So definitely prioritize what you're going to spend your mental energy on, and protect yourself, because realize that at the end of the day, if you've got a family, if you've got kids, if you've got a job, you've got responsibilities, you can't be your best self if you're letting. It's definitely not sustainable. So I went over all that, John. I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that.
Well, I thought that was great. First and foremost, I think the first step in all of this is just kind of being aware of the detriment of stress, and really how like powerful it could impact the power that it could really impact your recovery, and just how you perform and just how you feel. I think I think it's something that this is actually I like to look at things as like kind of four main pillars, and you look at like kind of training, nutrition, and I look at then like kind of sleep, and then I like to put stress management in its own category. I know like kind of sleep might like kind of there might be some overlap there, but I think that the stress management piece is something that people really often miss, as well as sleep. I think most people know that diet and exercise is important. And usually I think probably our audience, they usually probably have the training box checked off pretty good. The eating box may be checked off sometimes. And then the sleep and stress management, I think those are like usually the often overlooked things. So if you're really not making progress and you feel like you're doing like everything right, this is probably a place to look. And I think like you mentioned, now more than ever, I think this may want to you may want to put this this pillar as a precedent over the other kind of pillars because of the situation. I think I want to just kind of go over a couple like kind of practical takeaways. I think the number one thing is just kind of focus on what you can control, not what you can't. I think right now we're kind of told what we can't do. That's very common. You can't, you can't work. Your business is shut down. You can't, be in a room with this many people. You can't do this. Well, it's like, we can do remote workouts. We can, learn from our computers. We can connect with people online. So it's just good to focus on the things that you can do. And I think definitely this is a really key point where you want to really up the communication and maybe reach out to some people that you haven't, take advantage of, if you do have downtime, take advantage of that downtime. If you do have some opportunities, maybe do some things that you haven't. So if you aren't working or whatever the case may be, just use that time in an efficient way. And I would say, from there, once you kind of get a good handle on just being aware of when you're stressed, have some strategies to kind of come back down to reality. So one of the things that I've been trying to dive in a little bit more and share. So if you're following our page, going over some practical ways on breathing techniques. I think we had some episodes and some things on breathing, so I would check those out. Some of the yoga, the meditation. And one of the things I've been kind of doing, I'm not sure if Mark Bell kind of coined this or not, or I don't know if we have talked about it a few times. But I think we talk about like fasting a lot with food, and sometimes I kind of get a little crazy. I do think that there's some benefits of that, but I actually really like my favorite type of fasting is social media fast. So I like to do a social media fast at least once a week. It hasn't really happened as much, but usually like on like a Saturday, like when I'm not working, I like to have that as like my fasting day. So if I'm doing something with family or if I'm not working, there's sometimes people think I'm like dead because I literally just won't respond. My phone is just off. But I think that's important, and I feel good. And then when I'm on a social media fast, I usually try to either spend time with family, maybe watch a movie with a loved one, or just walk outside. And I try to like eliminate, like Mel said, you eliminate the stimulus. So whether it's positive or negative, like the less stimulus you have, it's going to help like de-stress you. Stress is stress. Like working out is a positive stress. But there are times where you just need to like literally do nothing. You need to kind of maybe be alone and just, we kind of say unplug. So I've used kind of the term like you want to unplug to recharge. So I think be among nature, go for a walk, meditate, yoga, take a nap, like maybe sleep in a little bit, watch some stupid show that just makes you laugh, just do like really like just stuff that's not going to really be stimulating on your brain, and things that are going to make you in a more positive state. Maybe that's gratitude journaling. Maybe there's a lot of things that you could do, but I think the biggest thing is that you want to kind of just take away the stimulus and just try to like just chill. That's really it. And I would try to, if you could do that like once a week, that's great. Depending on like what your schedule is, but I would schedule some time where you're just kind of doing nothing. Block it out. I'm going to fast on this day, especially if you feel like, and then, to Mel's point, I'm unfollow, there's an unfollow button. Just try to like eliminate things that stress you out. Try not to view those things. If you are in control of who you follow, you are in control of like what you consume. So if you are consuming content or you're consuming information that kind of triggers you to be more stressed, I would try to eliminate that stimulus personally. You may not be able to avoid it completely because, so I don't really watch the news that much. I really don't, especially now. I will research what I need to do. I will get the information that I need, and then I will get off. I'm not going to be watching because it's sad. It's sad to see like a lot of the stuff that's happening. It's sad to see. I don't really want to see people getting dying. I don't want to see people committing suicide. I don't want to see people burning buildings. I want to watch like a funny cat video or something, like I want to watch like, a penguin falling down a staircase. I don't know if that happened ever, but you get the idea.
What did the penguin do to you?
I know that's really mean. That's actually a bad example.
It's morbid.
That's actually that might set people off. So
Calling Peter
for the penguin lovers out there. But no, seriously, joking aside, I think it's important. So focus on the things you can control, not what you can't. Unplug, try some social media fasting, use the unfollow button, use the mute button on Instagram, use the unfollow button on Facebook. There'll be periods of time where I just start unfollowing like a lot of people, just because if they don't kind of bring me positive energy, or if they're not like a member of our community, I don't need to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't need to know like what Susie B from elementary school. It doesn't serve any purpose. Nothing against her. I wish her the best, but it's an unnecessary stimulus that I don't need. It's not going to benefit me in any way. It's not going to benefit our community in any way. So if it's not going to benefit you, I would eliminate that stimulus. And that could be a toxic friend. That could be a toxic relationship.
I think to add on to that, I would also, I had an interaction today, and I won't go into it too much, but essentially if you're going to remove someone from your life, right? I definitely think realize that you can definitely feel like, all right, you're contributing nothing to my life, but don't go out of your way to reach out to that person and tell them, hey, I'm unfollowing you because of this.
Yeah, it's not
because at the end of the day, in that moment, maybe you'll feel better. Maybe you'll feel like as the aggressor, it's coming out angry, and you might feel better in the moment. But realize at the end of the day, if someone is saying or doing or something that you don't like, and you're still watching it, I think accountability is important, where, okay, then you need to take ownership of the fact that you're choosing to look at this stuff and then remove yourself in a way that I think causing confrontation is definitely going to add to your stress. So realize, why do I feel the need to announce my departure and cause confrontation? Realize at the end of the day that your reaction to whatever anyone posts or does or anything, your reaction is entirely within your control. What is it about this person that is making me react in this way? And what can I do to kind of take ownership of my own emotions and behave in a mature way? Because I think that we're especially right now in the age of social media, we're losing that adult maturity kind of, hey, your actions and your words have consequences. You need to mellow out. So just realize that you can definitely remove people from your life. But always, 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 take the high road. And there's no need to, even if someone says something you disagree with, there's no need to get into more confrontations, because again, that is more stress for you. It might feel good in the moment, but you won't feel good about it later. Just don't do it.
It's great. We can kind of go on and on. I think it's we'll probably kind of put this on the runway. If you do want to, I want to kind of maybe provide a couple other. I don't know if I'm gonna be honest. If you're listening to this after the fact, we're both tired. It's been a lot, so we could definitely take our own advice. So I may not provide the links of the shows I'm talking about, but you guys can do a little legwork and just kind of scroll through and do a little Google search or a YouTube search or search on the podcast. But there's some other kind of good listens I think would be good. We got a couple of like meditation type episodes and breathing type episodes. I invite you to look at those. We have a couple of live yoga workouts I invite you to check out on the YouTube channel that will be coming out. And then also, the other thing that might be a good thing that's a little bit maybe seem out there, but it really ties in nicely to what we were talking about is I did a podcast, and I don't know if it's one or two podcasts because the second one may not have come out yet, but I did a podcast with my improv teacher. And one of the things that we learned in improv is that you want to accept and add to what your partner says. And you want to come things from, one thing that's helpful in improvisation is that you want to take the positive route of the story. So for example, if you're going into a haunted house, you want the door to be like open. You don't want it to be locked. So I think that obviously we're not improvising and we're not kind of doing a scene, but in life, I think it's also important to try to move things forward in a positive way, whether that be personal relationships or just kind of your own personal journey and your own personal goals. And just because you end a relationship doesn't mean it has to be like a catastrophe. I know, and like to Mel's point, if you're like unfollowing someone on social media, you don't need to it doesn't affect them in any way. And that's kind of like the benefit of the unfollow button is that they don't get notified. That's the difference between unfriending and unfollowing. So it's nothing against them. You just aren't interested in maybe consuming that content, and you still may be friends with that person, but just seeing their post just doesn't serve you in any way, and that's fine, and that's totally okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if you do want to check in with that person once in a while, you can certainly do that. But it's really important. What you consume is going to really affect your mental health. So you want to make sure that you're consuming as much positive information as you can, and you don't want to also, whether it's positive or negative, you just don't want to overload yourself. So those are some practical takeaways for stress management. There's a lot to unpack here, and it's an ongoing conversation. And I believe we will continue to do more things. I'm actually working on some different programs. And one of the things that I'm working on, like right now, I'm on like my phase 1 program, and I haven't been executing it perfectly, but I'm giving myself, I'm doing some things like visualization every day. I'm doing a little bit of yoga every day, and I'm taking a cold shower every day. And that's just something to like kind of wake me up and just kind of be grateful that like, man, it's like hot water is real nice, and it just kind of makes you appreciate what you have. So I think that's a kind of a good take home message. Appreciate what you have, see the good in people, focus on what you can control, not what you can't. And so that's our chat with Melon on stress management. If you guys enjoyed the episode, if you enjoyed the content, please give it a 5-star review. Please share it with a friend if you found it helpful. Thank you guys for listening. And until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.